So let's get started. Good morning, everybody. I'm Christine Jacobs. Many of you have been on our calls before, but I am the executive director of Represent PA. We are the PAC in Pennsylvania, completely dedicated to electing pro-choice Democratic women to the state legislature, with the idea of having a Democratic majority in both chambers. We're very proud of the work that we've done over the last 10 years, but particularly the work that we did in 2022, which enabled us to have our Joanna McClinton as the speaker. And as she's rolled out her team, we've seen who are the leads and who's on which committees in Harrisburg. And that really charges us all up with the idea of what can happen. How dirty is the environment in Pennsylvania? What are the big issues in Pennsylvania? When we started making a list of possible topics, we came up with, how about the air? How about the water? How about the soil? And so we decided to bring back Katie Blume, who's been with us before, but she's the political director of the Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania. And so she said, oh, we can tie this all into, she didn't say it that way, that's the way I talk, but she said we can tie it into one big discussion about, environmentally speaking, what's going on in Pennsylvania. And I asked her who she would like to have on the call with her from Harrisburg, and she suggested Tarah Probst and Mandy Steele, which thrilled me because they are both state representatives who were in their first term in Harrisburg and who were both elected with support from Represent PA. And so I'm just very proud that we've been helped to elect such strong women leaders for Harrisburg. Happy that Katie's gotten to know them and happy that they've been able to put together this discussion for you today. So Pennsylvania's environmental story isn't that great. On our list of things that we talk about at Represent, we come up with issues that we pull from, we newsjack and pull them from things that we read. Pennsylvania ranks 44th in the nation in terms of the state of our natural environment, 44th. Pennsylvania is the only state that does not tax businesses that are pulling oil and gas from our land. The only state. You look at Oklahoma, you look at Texas, you look at Louisiana, such fine, liberal bastions in this country. They all tax these businesses, but we do not. We have the third worst drinking water in the country by some measures. 1/3 of our streams and 1/3 of our waterways are polluted enough to harm wildlife, recreation, or drinking water. And things are getting worse. We started having this discussion a few weeks ago with the East Palestine derailment in Ohio, but it was on the Pennsylvania border, and that was not an isolated incident. There were 3 train derailments in the United States every day. Not all spill hazardous materials, but is there really control on how hazardous materials are transported across our state? A Bucks County chemical release in March caused panic in Philadelphia, where I live, and we started getting hourly messages as to whether the water was drinkable. And it come to find out that discharges frequently happen into the Delaware River. Pittsburgh's air is improved, but it still gets an F from the American Lung Association. The PA power sector was labeled the 5th dirtiest in the nation. And people of color are 39% of the population that live within 3 miles of existing and proposed power plants, and yet they're only 22% of our total population. Does this happen by accident? So it just keeps getting worse. But we're encouraged. We're going to hear from Katie Blume today, who's the political director of the Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania. And this has been an area where she's been active on social justice issues for 20 years. We're going to hear from Tarah Probst, who is a new state rep who received support from Represent, and she's on a variety of committees in Harrisburg. And she was the first female mayor of Stroudsburg. And those of you who were on our education call recently heard from Tarah on what's gone on with education funding and how. We're also pleased to have Mandy Steele representing Allegheny County. We supported her in her primary and her general election in 2022. She's got strong committee assignments, and she has worked around the state to look at getting rid of toxic substances. Again, somebody else we're very proud to support. So take it away, Katie Blume. And Katie has told us that she's an allergy sufferer because of the winds that we've had in Pennsylvania. So we don't have quite the glamorous Katie that we had in the picture, but she's still a very strong voice and somebody we needed to hear from.
I just hope that I don't lose my voice by the end of the day today. Thank you so much, Christine. And I do apologize. I am a little under the weather. A sign that extreme weather caused by climate change can really rile your allergies and cause more of these colds.
As I say to people all the time, it's a good thing that climate change is a hoax, because can you imagine how bad it would be if it was real?
Yep. As mentioned, I'm the Political and Legislative Director for Conservation Voters of Pennsylvania. And for those of you not familiar with our organization, we are regularly referred to as the statewide political voice for the environment, with a heavy, heavy focus on holding our elected officials accountable. We believe with our national partners at the National League of Conservation Voters, who do a lot of the federal work, we really believe in the cycle of accountability, which is why the Pennsylvania Environmental Scorecard is one of our largest projects that we release every other year. Marcellus money that tracks contributions from fossil fuel companies and affiliated folks to our elected officials, and all of those different kinds of accountability pieces, and making sure that constituents are also connected with their legislators to help push the environmental message in Pennsylvania. I do want to note, we have not updated our graphics online yet, but this is from December 2022. In theory, we potentially have a pro-environment state legislature, but we know that that's not true. We know that everything is hyper partisan right now. People are voting on party lines more than ever. And it's very hard to find places where folks can come together. So right now, if we could have some solid bipartisan environmental bills, we could probably actually get them passed. And just for these graphics that I put up here, obviously there's 2 seats open in the House for the special election that will happen on May 16th on the primary, and there is no open seat in the Senate. It's just a little bit of an old graphic that we need to update. But I do want to highlight those dark green dots you see. Those are our guaranteed pro-environment votes. Those are people who have 100% score on the environmental scorecard. Excuse me. Because we haven't had any environmental votes, Representatives Steele and Probst, they're actually in the light green because we need to see how they vote first. But I am confident they will be voting with the environment. So that's just to give you the breakdown. And there is, obviously, we know 1 vote extra in the House, and we are down several in the Senate in terms of partisanship. So I want to preface this by saying there is a lot that is interconnected between state and federal environmental policy right now. And a lot of that has to do with electing President Biden, having Congress, having a split Senate last year. Now we have a Democratic Senate this year, et cetera. To answer Corinne's question really quickly, you can actually go to conservationpa.org and find our scorecard there. And we have a great digital version, and you can also download the PDF version there as well. And you can see everybody's names. But I do want to highlight that there's really good things that have happened in DC that will impact what happens with Pennsylvania's environment. And we need to kind of keep this momentum going. So just to refresh folks, we had the Infrastructure Act passed last year. We had the Inflation Reduction Act passed last year. Both have really solid pro-environment portions in them, from electric vehicle infrastructure, lead pipe remediation, et cetera. In the Infrastructure Act, really good funding for some public transportation projects. And then in the Inflation Reduction Act, we have things like solar tax credits, environmental justice investments, as well as conservation investments that can be put into the 2023 to 2028 farm bill that Congress will be working on. So the other stuff is the EPA is making new rules. For those of you who are in southeastern PA, they just came out with a new proposed PFAS rule, which is really exciting. So we want to, think about that, and that can also push our state legislature. And then we have legislative action.
Katie, can you tell everybody what a PFA is?
Oh yes, oh gosh, don't ask me to say the whole word out.
No.
Floral, but it's a forever chemical.
Right.
So when we talk about forever chemicals or toxins that are in water regularly, microscopic, comparatively, that is what we are talking about. For folks, particularly in Montgomery and Bucks County, there are huge impacts of PFAS on the water systems there, and they are very expensive to remediate.
And they came, part of the way they came to be in those counties is because of the military facilities in those counties and jet fuel and all those kind of things.
Mm-hmm. And some of the legislative actions we've seen, we saw a really bad vote last week from the United States House. I know some folks might not want to hear this, but Congressman Fitzpatrick did vote with the environment last week. We were very impressed. I know we can disagree on a lot of other things. He's usually okay on that stuff. But they want to deregulate a whole bunch of stuff. Luckily, it's probably going to be blocked in the Democratic-led Senate. But there's also the Farm Bill, which we really have an opportunity to have some really good bipartisan legislation coming out of this, where we can really push some conservation investments from the funding from the IRA and maintain that to have climate smart agricultural practices. So that's some of the federal stuff that will ultimately impact some of the state funding as well. I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible because you probably want to hear from the representatives. But in 21 and 2022, it was a mixed year, as you can see here on the slide. In October, there were more tax credits given to fossil fuel companies. I'm not going to kind of dive into the who's, what's, where's, and why's. If you've been hearing something about hydrogen, you can come to a CVPA webinar on that on May 11th if you want to learn more. It does get a little confusing, but that's kind of like another market for fossil fuel and natural gas. The good, we got massive conservation funding. We got $850 million of pro-environment funding. I have Clean Streams funding there, whole home repairs. We had good environmental funding in the budget last year, as well as agency staff increase for DEP and DCNR, but we are nowhere near where we need to be. We also keep blocking attacks on RGGI, which is the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. It's kind of like a cap and trade program, but it forces carbon credits to be sold on the market, which in turn economically forces energy generation companies to start greening their energy generation. Simplest explanation I'll give. The other thing we've been fighting are constitutional amendments. There was a serious deregulatory constitutional amendment that was included in with the anti-abortion amendment, with the voter ID amendment. If you remember, we called them last year SB 106. This year it was SB 1, but we blocked that because of the nature of the House, thank goodness. But that anti-regulatory constitutional amendment would have allowed the legislature to void any regulation within 21 days of enactment. And that doesn't just affect the environment. That affects any regulations that the Department of Health puts out, regulations that the Department of Education puts out, any regulation across the board. And this was done actually in a retaliatory way against Governor Wolf, signing us up to join RGGI. So last session, mixed bag, but some really bright spots, especially in conservation. So what do we have coming up this year and next year? We have split legislature. Republicans controlling the Senate, Democrats holding on in the House. We have more anti-RGGI bills, more anti-regulatory bills. we keep seeing fossil fuel interests and the legislators that they work with keep trying to roll back regulations. And when we roll back regulations, that just means more pollution, less safe communities, less safe water, air that's harder to breathe. You heard Christine mention the spill in the Delaware River. That's a big problem because we also have pollution and reporting requirement bills that are starting to come up again. There's one introduced right now in the House. Again, don't think it's going to pass the House, thank goodness. But Representative Zimmerman has a bill there that would change spill reporting requirements. So right now, if you spill X amount of a bad thing into a Pennsylvania waterway, you are required to report it. If you spill, say, and I'm making this up, it's early and I have cold medicine, but say you spill 5 gallons of something bad in a Pennsylvania waterway, you have to report it. This legislation would say, nah, you have to spill at least 50 gallons of something bad into a Pennsylvania waterway. So we are seeing some of these bills come up again and again. Also things that would want to move money away from what we call environmental special funds. I'm a nerd. I can talk about this for an hour. There are over 600 special funds in Pennsylvania. The ones the environment cares about are the Environmental Stewardship Fund, the Keystone Recreation Fund, things like that. There's also, the Oil and Gas Lease Fund from lease fees that are paid for any drilling that happens on state property. That lease money gets split and divvied out. So it's about where they put the money in for the projects, but those environmental special funds are actually the grant programs. So if your local community ever applied for a Growing Greener grant from DCNR for your local community park, that's from an environmental special fund that protects those grants for recreation, typically recreation, trailways, etc. And we're also keeping an eye on bad democracy bills. People are like, why does an environmental organization care about democracy? First of all, we care about justice, right? Democracy is part of justice, along with environmental justice, etc. But we know that well over 70% of Pennsylvanians believe in protecting our environment and believe in Pennsylvania's Environmental Rights Amendment. But if we keep not doing good things for the environment, then there's a problem at the ballot box. And we need to keep working on our democracy. So we're looking at things, really awful voter ID laws that are incredibly prohibitive, etc. Things like banning drop boxes for mail-in ballots and stuff like that. That's the bad. The good. I'm clearly wishing we were back in football season, even though I'm a baseball fan with my graphics here. But offense, we should hear from the courts at some point later this year about joining Reggie. That's all being challenged in the courts. But the exciting thing is Senator Comita has introduced again, she introduced it last session and again this session, the Reggie Investments Act. And we're really excited about this. Pennsylvania can see anywhere from $600 million to $1 billion a year in proceeds from participating in the Reggie auctions, where they're auctioning those carbon credits. That's serious revenue. I don't want to say revenue, proceeds, money in the Pennsylvania's coffers from this auction. And the bill that Senator Comita has would invest in environmental justice communities. It would invest in businesses and industry to help kind of like decarbonize what they're doing to clean up their own pollution, be more energy efficient, invest in things like other weatherization programs. And it also has a set aside for energy communities as well. We know that some of the last coal-fired power plants in Pennsylvania are going to be closing, which we are grateful for because coal burning is awful. But how do we help those workers? And this bill helps to address some of that by investing in those communities. We're also looking at some other energy things, community solar programs, AEPS, that is Alternative Energy Portfolio Standards. when the state sets standards for what energy should be created in Pennsylvania, as we have a pretty deregulated energy grid here. I don't want to say grid, system. Right now, a very teeny tiny fraction is required to be solar and other clean energy. So what we want to do is we want to take the AEPS numbers and we want to make them larger. So we can say, okay, let's have 30% clean energy generation in our energy generating, standards. So that's a big one. And community solar can also help with that. And we have some legislators talking about combining them and things like that. The other thing we're looking at, and this is huge, and this is where some of the connection to the federal legislation comes in, is clean transportation. Making investments in electric vehicle infrastructure, utilizing maybe some of those federal tax credits for buying the electric vehicle. We're encouraging people to buy electric vehicles, and then the state can also get some of that federal funding, maybe combine with their own, to build out an electric vehicle infrastructure with charging stations, et cetera. Even some technology manufacturing as well. The Mack truck plant in the Lehigh Valley manufactures electric garbage trucks. It's really cool. So there are things that are starting to change there. We're also really looking a lot at environmental justice. The environmental community across the board in the country, and very particularly in Pennsylvania, is very, very white. Just to be honest, we are very white. And we are not the folks who are the most affected by air pollution, water pollution, et cetera. So it's really incumbent on us to make sure that partners' voices and environmental justice organizations and Black, Brown, Indigenous voices across the state are being lifted up as we are doing this work, because it's their communities that are being the most affected. I think we're all affected because Pennsylvania hasn't been great on the environment, but we really need to make sure those voices are being lifted up. Representative Donna Bullock and a host of other legislators working in conjunction with the Legislative Black Caucus have also put forward some environmental justice bills. So actually codifying the Environmental Justice Advisory Board at DEP and things like that. So it's pretty exciting. They were all introduced last session. They're starting to get slowly rolled out again for this session. So it's really exciting to see that happen, to really take care of those frontline and fence line communities. And lastly, we're looking at good democracy bills. I talked about how, we'd really like to block prohibitive voter ID bills. But if we're going to be blocking those things, what do we want, right? So we would love to see same-day registration. That makes it so much more easy for folks, and voting more accessible, extending timeframes for pre-canvassing for county election boards to process mail-in ballots, to make sure that there are plenty of mail-in ballot drop boxes in every county across the state. So there's some good things that we're advocating for as well. So that's the general offense we're looking at doing. We're in the midst of the budget process. I'm going to breeze through the budget process. I'm probably the only person in the world that gets excited about the Pennsylvania budget process. It can get wonky. But budget hearings are happening right now. Appropriations committees are hearing from agency secretaries. Governor Shapiro put out his budget. Republicans kind of have their answer. But June is what we call budget month. So we are looking right now on that slide. We're actually kind of towards the end there. We are in the legislative review and enactment of budget period. So as you can see, there's a few budget proposals. The governor released his budget last month. There's the people's budget, which is put together by a whole host of various advocacy groups. The Republicans have their issues. And then, of course, there's federal funding that impacts our budget. Part of the reason we got great investments in last year's budget was because of leftover ARPA funding, American Rescue Plan Act. Yes. But we now also have the Infrastructure and Inflation Reduction Act funding as well. So how all of these things play together is going to be very interesting. There will be trades. We will be having to figure it out. Karen, usually it is it does typically skew to the progressive side of things. Usually that is put out by the Keystone Research Center and the Pennsylvania Budget and Policy Center. And I think they have a budget briefing coming up actually in person. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the budget. There's not a lot happening legislatively right now. There's very, very, very many new members in the state legislature. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Yes, you can always get involved. Feel free to sign up for our emails. I know some folks had asked in the chat where to find the scorecard. I'll be dropping those links in the chat. Feel free to sign up for our alerts, etc. And if you live in Monroe, Pike, Northampton, Lehigh, Bucks, Chester, Delaware, Philadelphia, Montgomery counties, we have local folks on the ground. So, that, I think my next slide is just a thank you slide with my email if anybody wants it. Yep, it's a thank you slide. So that is sort of the broad overview of the environment in Pennsylvania, some good things that we've gotten done, and looking ahead to finding some good bipartisan legislation moving forward. So that is it, and thank you.
Very good. Mandy and Tara, have you decided who's going next, or do you just want to comment on some of the things that you heard?
Well, if it's okay, I'm gonna save the best for last, and that would be Mandy, because first of all, I want to say thank you to Represent. If it wasn't for you, I couldn't have kicked off my campaign. And I told you that last time. You really came through for me, and you're so important to me, just so you know, and everybody who supports you.
And we're very proud of you too, because you're a strong voice, and I was so happy when Katie said contact Tara and contact Mandy, because they're already strong voices in Harrisburg. So
well, thank you.
Fulfilling our goal.
Thank you. And I do want to thank also Katie, because she has a way of explaining things that people who aren't environmentalists can totally understand. And I just love the way she presents. I love the facts and information, because I was taking notes. There's things I have to be looking out for too. And one of the things I do want to say about Mandy Steele is that we met first day, it was like November 14th when we had our little freshman training. She is from the Ohio border. I am from the New Jersey border. I am a skilled expert, I like to say, in education, fighting for all of those things. She is a skilled expert in environment. And whenever something comes up, I go to her, because I rely on her for facts. And if she's a little unsure, then it's Katie. But my point is that I am not an expert on the environment. I'm not a Tarah Zirinsky who is. I'm not a Mandy Steele. I'm not a Katie Blume. But what I am is I want the best for our environment, and I support all the initiatives. So I do a lot of questions and asking, and if I know someone's going to be meeting with me, I want to know what our defense is going to be about it. So I'm learning as I'm going. So make no mistake, I could not get up there and speak like Tara or Mandy or Kate, but I can be an advocate, and I can be the votes, and I can try for change. So what I have done is about 5 or 6 years ago, I joined the Broadhead Watershed Association, and I surround myself with people who are environmentalists. Like I saw Craig Todd was on this Represent call. I mean, he's just a wealth of information. I learned about our waterways, and luckily in Monroe County, we have exceptional quality water, and we'd like to keep it that way. I rely on Maureen Madden with 100% scorecard for the environment. And, she's got the plastic bag initiative coming out. So, I mean, I don't know who wouldn't vote for that, but apparently Rosemary Brown didn't vote for it, 2 years ago, because she's friends with the person that runs the plastic bag manufacturing plant in Pennsylvania, right? So this is all how it works. And it's really gross, because our surrounding states ban plastic bags. It's not going to be a hard thing to do. So what I can do is I can tell you what I can promise. I can promise if I don't know the answer, I'm going to contact people that are true environmentalists. I can promise you that I'm never going to line my pockets with anti-environmental initiatives. I can promise you that I will always be a vote for the environment. I can promise you that I'm an open book. And if I don't know something, I'm not afraid to say I don't know the answer to that, some of the terms that are used. I mean, even Mandy explained it to me about the methane and the initiatives that she's taking care of. It was like, I felt like I was in college at a college course. I was so intent on listening to her and saying, I didn't even realize that this is how it works or this is what's going on. So I'm really relying on my peers for this. And I hope that they can do the same for me when it comes to, education and different parts like that. That's what we're here for. And lucky for Katie, our freshman class right now of 29, boy, they're smart and competent and just awesome. And I really feel that, I mean, if there's someone that wouldn't vote on environmental issues, I would probably lose my house on that bet. So that's the good news. So all those maybes out there, I think you're going to find there's a lot more pro environment for yourself. So getting forward, one of the things that I did do preparing for this meeting is I went to our Broadhead Watershed Association and I said, what are our impacts? Like, I know for the Interstate 80 project that PennDOT is doing here, I know our impacts. I mean, PennDOT does what they want to do. They're moving our creeks. There's, there's going to be storm water issues. There's all these different things. And I think, well, what did I do as mayor in the borough of Stroudsburg besides, promote rain barrels, promote pervious pavers, recycling. We have identified in our borough of East Stroudsburg and Stroudsburg, we have an intense recycling program where everything has to be separated. They pick up curbside. We have the recycling plant. And we really got serious with this because there were some bad actors and garbage companies that were just taking the recycling. So we streamlined it. We did an RFP. We have one contractor for the borough, and that one contractor does not touch our recycling. And I think it was over $100,000 that came back to Twin Boroughs because people are recycling the right way now. So I'm really trying to do everything I can. But when it comes to the Broadhead Watershed Association, the Broadhead Watershed Association's watershed is state level importance and should be given the level attention from state government. Efforts to protect wetlands and special protection waters must be expanded. They're not right now. I still hear some people say, well, BWA is just an activist group. I mean, BWA went to court for us in 2019 to keep our waterways pristine. They're more than just an activist group. The Broadhead Watershed Association has identified a significant need for dedicated Pennsylvania state funding earmarked to support local nonprofit 501c3 watershed associations to help support their data collection and educational programs, with emphasis specifically targeting Northeast Pennsylvania and the Middle Upper Delaware, for example, Pike, Carbon, Wayne, and Monroe counties, due to the region's significant abundance of special protection designated creeks, right? And then third, finally, the DEP should be fully staffed and funded so they can properly have oversight of our waterways. And that's one thing that we haven't been able to do. We have not been able to fully fund the Department of Environmental Protection. Everybody knows it. Everybody talks about it. And we need to get this done. We need help, right? I know that people from contractors from New Jersey are bringing in dirt and doing foundations and doing backfill with out-of-state dirt that's not allowed. Little things like that that are going on in our municipalities that we just can't catch because we don't have enough people to be the watchdog. So basically, state support to incentivize regional municipal planning agreements as well, so that this way we can go ahead and make these agreements with our local municipalities and have the manpower to help them. These are just little things that I'm trying to work on and get involved in to help our environment. We can all do everything one step at a time, but I do know that I co-sponsored every one of Mandy's pieces of legislation that she's going to be introducing. I co-sponsored the bags, the straws, the methane. I mean, you name it, I co-sponsored it because I know that even though I might not fully understand everything about that bill, I know it is for the betterment of our environment. I know it's for the betterment of Pennsylvania. We are a Commonwealth and our natural resources belong to all of us. And it's time we start feeling that. So with that said, that's all I'm going to say. And I'd like to pass it on to Mandy Steele, who I just admire. So I don't know if she's on the call though. There she is. Hi, Mandy.
Hi, Tara.
So thank you, for inviting me.
Thank you. Mandy, good to see you.
Good to see you, Christine, and everyone. So glad to be here with you. And my good friend, Rep. Probst. That was awesome. Not only is Tarah, not only does she sponsor all of my proposals, but she's always the first one to do it. So she's really a heck of an ally for us and a powerful voice and advocate for our public schools. So it's a real honor to serve with her. She's an extraordinary talent. And Katie Blume, who, like Tarah said, knocks it out of the park every time. My gosh, are you good at that, Katie? You really teach me something every time I hear you speak. Represent PA, thank you for having me. You were instrumental in my campaign. I say that every time I see you because it's true. I don't know if I'd be here without you. So thank you again. If it's okay with you, I'll talk a little bit about a couple of things I'm working on, and then maybe we can have a conversation. I'd be so glad to answer questions about what's going on there.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, so Katie led us through what's going on right now. The two key areas in my mind are the portfolio standards. So we've got to work in a collaborative way to make sure that a larger portion of our energy is coming from renewables. And I think we've got a real chance of making that happen this time. Second, what is tortures me is that oil and gas has not paid their fair share here in Pennsylvania. It is unacceptable. What lies beneath our feet is our birthright as Pennsylvanians, and it's been stolen from us. So how do we change that? We've tried many times in the past to implement a severance tax, and it has failed. And as Katie mentioned, we've got a split body that we have to work with. So I see a real avenue through the impact fee. So what I'm proposing is that we raise that impact fee, and bear with me for a second. We use the raised portion of that fee to award it back to oil and gas, hang on, in order for them to implement some really incredible methane reduction technologies that are out there, available, and have been implemented by some. We cannot force these companies to do this, but we can compel them through this program. I've spent months shopping this around. It's got broad bipartisan support and support from the governor. So I think it's a real possibility for us to actually get our foot in the door on increased fees and taxation to oil and gas, while simultaneously significantly dropping methane leakage in the state. So I'm so excited about that. Glad to talk about that more. Also, I've introduced a number of bills pertaining to some toxic chemicals, trying to implement a ban at state level on an asphalt sealant that is a primary component of both our air and water pollution. I've talked with you guys about that in the past. More transparency on food labels and pesticides, banning certain chemicals that are killing our bees and potentially dramatically impacting our food chain. And there's a grand jury report on fracking. And so together with some other legislators, we're introducing a package of bills to implement those recommendations. Most importantly, giving our attorney general authority over oil and gas so we can bring charges on some of the worst offenses that we've seen in this state. Reggie is a concern. It may fail, and let's hope that it doesn't, but it could. And so the path to, let me say that our plan B needs to be that portfolio standards. That's our avenue there, and increase fees and taxation on oil and gas. So we have a backup plan. If Reggie fails, all hope is not lost, but it is our best option. So let's continue to push for that. Glad to take any questions that there are.
Somebody asked the question if there's a bill number for the revamped impact fee on oil and gas. Has that progressed that far?
No, we are not. We don't have a bill number yet.
Okay, when you do, and this issue is the kind of thing that we love to send out to our subscribers, just to make sure that we're, one of the things we can do and will do more of is letting our mailing list, which is large, know what's going on in these areas so that they can be supporting you better. One thing to get you elected, the other thing is to get you doing the things you want to do.
Yeah, that's right. And by the way, I'm one of the targeted races in the state by the Commonwealth Foundation. So there has been a negative mailer sent out nearly every week that I've held office. So they are spending hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars on me and a couple of others in this state. They're going to try to flip these seats back. I don't think they're going to be successful, but it's going to take a heck of an effort for us to hold this seat. One other thing, I talked a little bit about the legislative action, but I wanted to talk to you about the local opportunity that really is climate now. And when I was running, people descended from all over and said, don't talk about climate change so much. But my experience was that you can talk about climate change at doors and with people. I'm in southwestern Pennsylvania, which is historically not a strong climate-oriented community. But you know what? These are communities that have been decimated by oil and gas. Their kids have asthma, they're sick, their water's polluted. Now the oil and gas companies have abandoned them. So the opportunity is there to have a conversation around the opportunity that is climate change. We can create jobs. We can rebuild your communities. We can rebuild your economies through action on climate change. And people are energized by that. I brought Shapiro here several times to say, look at this opportunity that we have. And based on the size of grant funding that we just got here in this district, which usually does not see much funding, people are with us. So we had the last coal-fired power plant in our county, in Allegheny County, in my district recently closed. Now, guess what? It's a horribly contaminated brownfield. But brownfields are opportunities for us. You can do a lot of things on those brownfield sites that are a tremendous benefit to the community. So I have people from the state, from the county, from the municipal governments convening. We have the top minds in sustainable planning and architecture convening to talk about what to do with these brownfield sites. And I think we're going to see a portion of these sites dedicated to sustainable housing, a portion to wetland creation and park creation, and really we're going to transform a big area of southwestern Pennsylvania through these kinds of actions. So we can implement this kind of stuff locally. We can win the hearts and minds of our voters.
I just saw a question that Arthur asked, does the EPA or the DEP have any authority to compel or advise fossil fuel companies to reduce or to control their methane leaks and to reduce methane?
Well, Katie can maybe talk about this, but let me say that, our governor, doesn't want to, our governor is carefully playing his hand.
We all recognize that in our governor.
Yes. Katie,
Okay.
do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, it's our path right now, given both the federal and state legislature in terms of regulating methane, it's going to have to be regulatory, right? So we have new rules about power plants that should be coming out of EPA. I think the comment period is opening up soon for EPA. There are going to be some similar stipulations on the states if the EPA does that. And right now, one of the best things to regulate our emissions in Pennsylvania, RGGI, is currently being held up in the courts already. But that is some lingering stuff from the prior fully Republican controlled legislature. So we're looking ahead, hoping that depending on how the courts rule on RGGI later this year, that we can make some more regulatory movement forward. There have been some baby steps from DEP so far, and there's also some pathways forward that I think we could actually get some decent bipartisan support for, just in terms of new technologies. And I'm not talking about the big technologies, but I'm talking about some of those smaller engineering technologies. Think about things like widgets that could improve the process to reduce emissions. And we also have a lot of federal funding coming in. One of the big things that we have for methane leaks in Pennsylvania are abandoned and orphaned wells. Pennsylvania has been, oil was discovered here, right? Not Texas. There's a reason there's Oil City, Pennsylvania. So we have this and there's so many have been abandoned and orphaned for years. So there's a lot of federal money also coming in to clean up all of those. And DEP last year applied for all of that money pretty immediately. So that these are all steps in the right direction, but the way things are right now, there's some hesitation, as Representative Steele said, about sort of Governor Shapiro being moderated in his approach, which is appropriate. We'll see how this court case plays out, and it might kind of free us up to do a little bit more.
Thank you. Tara Zirinsky, do you want to throw in a minute or so of your environmental work or why this is important to you?
Well, this has always been
A
important
past
to me.
candidate that we supported, so we have a lot of affection for her.
I really appreciate that too. And I mean, I've been doing environmental work for over a decade, first with Food and Water Watch, and then as a Northampton County Councilwoman, I'm the chair of the Energy, Environment, and Land Use Committee. And I can tell you that as that chair, my job is really busy because there are so many environmental issues. For the past 4 years, we've been dealing with karst geology and sinkholes and the dewatering events that happened in the Bushkill Creek. And a lot of that had to do with the 60 million gallons of water being pumped back into the Bushkill Creek by a local cement company called Boozy Unisem. And what we don't realize is the impacts on our waterways from the just pressure of multiple developments, not only commercial and industrial, but also residential. We have a lot of waterways in Pennsylvania, and these increased pressures put pressure on the strata of the earth. You know, karst geology is just these calcium deposits, and the water goes through them. And when the sinkholes appear, a car was swallowed in the city of Easton. Do you know what I mean? So that's one of the issues that we're dealing with here. We're always dealing with PFAS. We have some exciting possibilities on the horizon to deal with the PFOS situation. We have expanding landfills in Northampton County. One in particular, the Bethlehem landfill, wants to expand on a conserved piece of property next to the D&L Trail, next to the National Heritage Corridor. And we're trying to stop that as well. We have to figure out what to do with our garbage. It's not just about plastic, it's about everything that we're putting into these landfills. And also the waste that now we're dumping elsewhere. We have another issue in Northampton County with the Nazareth Waste Authority, Solid Waste Authority. And what they did was they bought a preserved piece of property, a preserved farm that that had intended to be preserved for agricultural use. They are now spreading sludge on it. And so we know that inherent to sludge, whether it's A or B, solid or not, when you spread that on the earth, that's releasing toxic chemicals, not only into the ground and the soil, but also to the underlying waterways. And now we have one property in Palmer that already reached the DEP allowable levels for pollution. And this Nazareth Authority has been able to purchase another one to do the same thing too. So I think the environment is so important, and that's why it's always at the forefront of my mind. My hope as controller is that I will understand the buckets of money and be able to push the allocation towards environmental issues that will make Northampton County thrive. You know, that's always the goal.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our guests. I know there were some questions in the chat that we didn't get answered. We will send them, we will put them together. We may send them out to our guests or do a little research on our own. And then when we send out the video to everybody from this event, we'll have some answers for you.
Christine, can I make one parting point?
Absolutely. I was going to ask each of you if you'd like to. So go ahead, Mandy, lead us off.
Thank you so much. So two things from my perspective. If you're pushing your legislators or having conversations with people that are interested, methane, we've got to drop methane. Methane is our scientific community is telling us you must reduce methane emissions. 2, I remember being on a flight. I'm 45 now. When I was young, and I sat next to a very handsome fellow who was like a construction worker guy. And he had a accent, like a Texas accent. And I said, "Oh, what are you doing coming to Pittsburgh?" And he said, "Well, I'm here to explore, to work on a gas well." And I said, "Oh, what's that?" And he said, "Look around the plane." And he pointed, and there were probably 35 other guys like him. And this is when fracking was brand new. And now look where we are. We did not have a proper regulatory framework in place.
Right.
And so many of these issues are arising from that. Now we are on the precipice of hydrogen. So hydrogen, we've got to get a strong framework to protect the people that live in this state from hydrogen. It has to be done right. It really probably shouldn't come to Pennsylvania at all. But if it's unavoidable, let's make sure we have a strong framework in place. So please talk about hydrogen. Please spread the word on hydrogen in your communities. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Tarah Probst or Katie Blume, you want to make a final comment?
If you want to learn more about hydrogen, May 11th, check out CVPA's social media email list. If you're on it, we're going to be doing sort of a hydrogen education webinar for you. Just follow up on that. I actually have to go to another meeting, but thank you all for having me. And thank you, electeds and candidates. Always love it. Bye-bye.
And love having you. Thank you for responding to the call, Katie.
Yep.
Tarah Probst, want to say goodbye?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. Always represent, because my God, you always have so many people on your Zooms, and we keep them abreast of what's going on. They're activists. And again, I couldn't have done it without you, even in 2018. And you put me over the edge in 2022. And you're just wonderful. And I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Our visitors, our guests today were amazing. They were terrific. They reinforced all the things that we keep talking about and represent. We want to have more Tarah Probst. We want to have more Mandy Steeles. We want to give Katie Blume a legislature that she can go talk to. My current goal is I look at Michigan with envy. Any of you who watch the national news know that Michigan this time flipped their legislature, and they have their a strong progressive Democratic governor. They are putting through more things about justice work, about working on voting rights, on so many issues in Michigan. And with a Democratic Senate, we can do that. Even if our governor needs to be prodded along a little bit, if he had both a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House, he would make those actions. Our House majority is too slim. We have 2 open seats today. Those primary elections are going to be, their special elections are going to be on primary day in May. We have endorsed Heather Boyd in the 163rd in Delaware County. Mike Zabel, a Democrat, resigned from that seat. And we're very proud to be coming out soon with our official announcement about our endorsement of Heather Boyd to take that seat. The other seat is the Republican seat. So we've got to maintain our majority by winning this district. The Senate is very close. We've got we still are down in the Senate, but there are 3 seats that we think might be flippable, the most flippable when we look at the numbers. Senate District 15 in Dauphin County, 37 in Allegheny, and 49 in Erie. These are going to be expensive races, and we're looking for not only funding, but we're also looking to see if anybody knows great women candidates in those districts. We're raising money this year because we want to provide funding to candidates who might show women candidates if they show up in those districts, so we can provide early support. We haven't provided as much. We had a lot of our effort was based on the House in the past, and we really want to this time put up a lot more effort into the Senate campaigns in order to flip those seats. And we heard from Mandy Steele about how much money is being put by the Commonwealth Foundation is already being put up against her in Allegheny County. She had an expensive race. She was one of our top grantees. You know, we made a significant investment in her campaign, and we're looking for money for to support our re-elects in December, so we scare off the competition in some of these districts. Early money is important. The other thing I wanted to make a commercial for is the whole issue of event planning. I love this topic today. I think our speakers did an excellent job of providing information to all of you. what else would you like to hear about? What organizations you involved in, and that we could bring people together. I love when we find somebody, and I reached out to Katie Blume and she said, go to Tarah and go to Mandy, and I'd love to do an event with them. This is the kind of work we do because it really supports Pennsylvanians and where we're going. And the more topics we have like this, the more we have an educated voter base, an educated donor base in Pennsylvania, the more women like Tarah and Mandy we can elect. And I thank you very much for your time and your energy today. We'll be sending out the information on this. So thank you.